Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. We talked a bit last week about that Eco-Apocalypse conference in Glasgow, Scotland, featuring young Greta Thunberg. More of the blah, blah, blah shaming from young Greta, what politicians aren't doing and aren't doing quickly enough.
And real quick, over the weekend, she had an outdoor event, and she put, one of those medical face masks that we wear, she put it over the microphone. So it looked like the microphone had a little diaper on top of it, because that's going to stop the spread of COVID, guys. Yeah.
But we're well beyond just the tongue lashings of Greta Thunberg when it comes to saving the planet from climate apocalypse. Andreas Malm, we also heard from him last week. He's the author of the intriguing manifesto, How to Blow Up a Pipeline. He recently did a sit-down with the New Yorker for one of their podcasts. Of course he did. Receptive audience. And had this to say about violence when it comes to advancing the cause of saving the planet from climate apocalypse.
A call for the movement to diversify its tactics and move away from an exclusive focus on polite, gentle, and perfectly peaceful civil disobedience.
What actions are you recommending for the movement?
Well, I am recommending that the movement continues with mass action and civil disobedience, but also opens up for property destruction. So I'm not saying we should stop strikes or square occupations or demonstrations of the usual kind. I'm all in favor of that. But I do think we need to step up because so little has changed and so many investments are still being poured into new fossil fuel projects. So I am in favor of destroying machines, property, not harming people. That's a very, very important distinction there. And I think property can be destroyed in all manner of ways, or it can be neutralized in a very gentle fashion, as when we deflated the SUVs, or in a more spectacular fashion, as in potentially blowing up a pipeline that's under construction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good stuff. Sure.
Not violent in nature by any means.
Well, property crimes are not violent crimes. We know that from Nicole Hannah-Jones at the 1619 Project and other proponents of symbolic takings. And, of course, when you start blowing up things, you're not targeting human beings, but, some of these demolition experts in the green movement, they could make a mistake, some collateral damage. But again,
for the greater good.
The ends justify the means. Absolutely. Right. We're on to big things now. Grayson Quay joins us to discuss in further detail. He's a Young Voices Associate Contributor based in Arlington, Virginia. His writing has been published in the Post-Gazette there in Pittsburgh, Washington Examiner, American Conservative as well. Grayson, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Dan. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I don't know. Is this really this Andreas Malm his book and now his statements in defense of his book about property crimes? Is this really so new when it comes to the left wanting their way?
No, I don't think it is. Just last summer, we had the NPR interview, that shameful puff piece that was done with Vicky Osterweel, the author of In Defense of Looting, which she called proletarian shopping. Great euphemism there. And then the funniest part of that whole thing is that if you open to the front page of her book, there's a copyright notice asking you to respect her property rights.
Yes. Oh, right. Irony abounds here. And so, a lot of people are suggesting, we were even talking about it a bit before, the context of COVID, that you have all of these declarations now that everything on the left's agenda has a public health crisis at its root. And you're going to have to apply some of the same remedies for public health crises, whether it's a virus or it's their interpretation of what's happening to the Earth's temperature. Do you see it going in that direction, too, at some point?
I definitely do. And even the public health crisis stuff, you can see how selectively that's being applied. They just let 15,000 people wait across the southern border without so much as a nasal swab. But if, you or I don't comply with the vaccine mandates or the testing mandates, we could lose our jobs.
Right. It's interesting. Tony Fauci, Saint Tony Fauci, he is canonized by Our Lady of Perpetual COVID. He said migrants are absolutely not driving the COVID-19 surge. Well, okay, they may or may not. How would you know that?
I don't know.
Yeah, how does anybody know
who's the same thing? It's like how the Black Lives Matter protests weren't driving COVID.
Right. You don't. They don't know. I mean, you don't know. And I'm not trying to ostracize migrants any more than I'm trying to ostracize, I don't know, a teacher who doesn't want to get vax mandate, wanting to get vaxxed because of the mandate or so forth. But these categorical statements that they make are just stunning. They have no idea. It makes no sense as compared to their concern, say, for you gathering with your family at Christmas. But 15,000 people in Del Rio, Texas, not a problem.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that they've reached the point of self-righteousness where they think that whatever means they use to achieve their goals are justified, right? Which is a departure for as long as I can remember, right? I mean, obviously we've had a civil war and stuff, so you go back far enough. But as far as I can remember, we were playing by the same rules, right? There was this shared commitment on right and left that we're going to achieve our goals through legal means and through persuasion. And I think that the left has convinced themselves that taking the time to do that is inexcusable for them because their causes are so righteous and so urgent.
Well, do you think all these vaccine mandates are going to create another civil war? Well, tens of thousands of people are losing their jobs today in New York City and in the entire state of New York. 3,800 nurses got fired in Colorado.
You're certainly right about that. Yeah, I hope not, but I really do see something bad coming because I think people on the right are slowly starting to realize that when the left clutches their pearls and says, oh, how dare you violate our democratic norms, that this is a trick, that they have a double standard there. And so I think this shared commitment to rule of law has upheld a little more strongly on the right than on the left. You see exceptions to that, like January 6th, for example. But I think you're going to start seeing a lot more of those.
The other thing, too, the parallel between the climate debate and COVID is data that doesn't square with their story goes largely unreported, or if it's reported, ignored as marginalized as anomalous. So, for example, the story, Seattle Times, not exactly a conservative outlet. The South Pole posts the most severe cold season on record. Minus 78 degrees from April to September. Coldest dating back to 1957, 4.5 degrees lower than the most recent 30-year average. But of course, we still, so this is still, but it's an anomaly because we still have wildfires in California. But none that sort of thing that doesn't factor into the discussion at all among the zealots in terms of how do you explain that? How does that fit into sort of the overall assessment of the threat posed by climate change?
Well, I don't think climate change is fake, just like I don't think COVID is fake.
Neither do I.
Yeah, I think climate change is real and that we're contributing to it in some way. What makes me nervous is I think that there's a very large political faction that sees this as an emergency that they can use to justify absolutely anything, and that is determined not to let that crisis go to waste.
Now, you write in your piece on the topic of the general topic of the eco-apocalyptos, pointing out hypocrisy doesn't do a bit of good. The mainstream conservative mantra of, wow, imagine if the situation were reversed, has become a joke in certain corners of right-wing Twitter. You write, despite the urgings of David French and his ilk, conservatives have become increasingly unwilling to plant and harvest while the other side beats its plowshares into swords. Develop that a little bit, too, because I'm not sure David French is a wartime consigliere.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Well, in my piece, I started off with this thought experiment that I did where I imagined if instead of being called How to Blow Up a Pipeline, Andreas Malm's book was called How to Blow Up an Abortion Clinic.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, first of all, he would have never been invited on the New Yorker Radio Hour. And second of all, he probably would have been fired from his university, had his book blacklisted from every publisher. His bank would have probably closed out his account. He'd have probably been placed under investigation and surveillance by the FBI. And yet, if it's How to Blow Up a Pipeline, you're fated by the mouthpieces of our elite society. Same thing if you're Vicky Osterweel and you advocate looting in favor of racial justice somehow. So I think, there is this hypocrisy. But then, as I was thinking this through, I thought, well, pointing out this hypocrisy is nothing new. I just think what's happening is that this hypocrisy is becoming harder and harder to deny for so many people. And, you see if they're going to legalize looting, let these caravans cross the border and all this other stuff, then why should people on the other side follow the rules? What's the point?
Well, right, and then the descent into anarchy speeds up. I guess that's the point.
Enter
right?
Thomas Hobbes.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. And so, do you want to live in a Hobbesian state of nature? No, I do not. But so that then it becomes right. It's the debate over like the rule of law, equally applied, or might makes right, and that does seem to be the debate we're having on all of these issues, and thus as a society writ large.
Yeah, and I think that this Supreme Court term is going to clarify a lot of those issues for a lot of people, especially in the pro-life movement. It's been 50 plus years that they've been trying to reverse the Roe v. Wade decision through legal means. And if it's not overturned in this term, they're not going to revisit that precedent for decades and decades to come. So at that point, it'll be a question of either, well, just throw up our hands and give up and do what we can to try to help people on the ground, or, hopefully not take matters into our own hands in the way that we've seen many people on the left do when it comes to the Black Lives Matter protests and stuff. I don't want to live in that kind of country.
Yeah, agreed.
Taking over police districts.
Grayson Quay, Young Voices Associate contributor based in Arlington, Virginia. His writings in the Pittsburgh Post, Washington Examiner, American Conservative, The Spectator as well. We were talking about his piece there in The Spectator. The Green Movement flirts with violent sabotage. Grayson, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what Chicago is talking about. It's Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560. The Answer.
The Lou Dobbs Financial Report is brought to you by Signature Bank, helping local businesses succeed. Visit signaturebank.bank for your commercial banking needs.
I'm Lou Dobbs. DHL raising U.S. shipping costs by 6%. Inflation may sabotage the holiday shopping season, and vaccine mandates affecting fast food sales. Those stories next. Mike Lindell, the inventor and CEO of MyPillow, wants to give back to our listeners. You can get great discounts